Hi. Recently, I've been releasing a lot of content discussing the science of water fasting, from 1 day to 2 weeks of water fasting and what happens to your health. Well, on one of those videos, I had an amazing subscriber comment that he underwent an over 50-day water fast, and that sparked this idea. Why not interview him and get his experience? And beyond even that, why not explain the physiology of what happened to him as he describes his experiences? So that's exactly what I did. This is the first of 3 videos breaking down my interview with Thrag of YouTube, or Ron of real life. We cover 3 topics. 1, how long the fast was and how much weight did he lose. 2, why Ron chose water fasting over other methods. And 3, he had the foresight to go to the doctor. So what happened to his health during the fast? Let's begin.
My water fast was 54 days. And I started at exactly 258.3 pounds. And on my 52nd day, I was 195.8. And then I guess it's fair to say, considering the average of around roughly 0.7, I probably lost an additional pound and a half from the 195, from the 195.8. So essentially, I essentially, to keep it simple, I went from 260 pounds to about, I want to say probably 192, 193.
Okay, so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why Ron lost so much weight. If you aren't consuming any macromolecules like fats and carbohydrates that can be used by your cells to generate energy, the body is required to burn through what glycogen reserves exist in the muscles and liver, known as glycogenolysis, as well as promote lipolysis, fat molecule release from the fat cells into the bloodstream to be taken up by millions of cells for them to use their fat metabolism capabilities to oxidize or utilize the fat molecules for energy production. Many hormones change, so insulin tanks, ghrelin rises, leptin drops, neuropeptide Y increases. So much changes. We'll discuss some of these coming up, but for now, suffice it to say that Ron's body went through a major shift in hormonal profile and fat metabolism, all to keep him alive as he lost almost 31 kilograms, 70 pounds. Next, I asked him why he chose a water fast over some other methods of weight loss and health betterment. Here's Ron.
I gained weight when I fractured my ankle running, and at the same time, I fractured my ankle pretty bad, and I also dislocated my shoulder on the same fall. So I've always been really, I love physical activity, and that kind of threw me into a little bit of a hole where it's like, it was like my mother, had to help me take a shower. That was pretty hard on me. And yeah, I gained a lot of weight because I've always been someone who has a huge appetite for eating. So that led to a culmination of just rapid weight gain, and considering, when I was young, I also, I was actually I was a heavy set kid. I was pretty fat. I've read multiple books. I actually was exposed to Jason Fung. I'm not sure if you know who Dr. Jason, but I was exposed to Dr. Jason Fung, I think 10 days into my fast. And I just came across a video by a healthy alternative. I just watched a few of his videos about fasting. I had found out about Angus, and I've always been the type of like, well, I didn't need my exact saying, well, I didn't need supervision to get to this weight. Why do I need supervision to get back down? So, it's the kind of screw mentality I have, I guess. But, that's how I explain it to myself. I'm like, our ancestors probably did much worse than this.
So, Ron went through a hard time with a tough ankle injury, which would be extremely difficult for any of us. But after gaining weight, he decided on going to the complete extreme into the opposite direction as possible. So, I think his tough minded mentality allowed him to do something that few people can do, which is really admirable. That said, he mentioned not needing supervision to get back out of this at the time overweight situation. Again, I really admire the mentality, but there are some nuances to point out here. So actually, before I get into them, in a future video, he'll even mention some of the reasons why supervision, or at least guidance, might have saved him some trouble during his water fast, but we'll save that for the near future. The point being is that while our body can regulate excess well, excess consumption, for example, for a long time, years even, it actually has more difficulty when we lack certain nutrients, because not all molecules that we consume are stored. So when we stop consuming them, our body handles it well enough for a while, but eventually uses drastic means to make sure that we don't hurt ourselves. So while supervision may not be necessary, there are more considerations than going from overeating to doing an abrupt U-turn into not eating anything. So we'll discuss that in more detail later in this series. Next, we discussed some of his health markers when he visited the doctor. Here's Ron again.
I went to my doctor and I just wanted to see how she would react without knowing anything, Essentially, it was almost like a test, it was like testing like a student, like, hey, here's the numbers, here's the questions, what can you deduce from, these numbers, what can you deduce? Is he healthy or what? So I kind of just wanted to see what her professional opinion was without any sort of bias at all. So, because I needed to do a physical anyways. And so I organized that, and part of the physical was, due to the nature of my job, they had to see almost everything, So I just wanted to see. And all she mentioned to me was that I had a lower than normal fasting glucose, which makes sense because I'm 17 days fasted at that point, and I had a very low vitamin D level. That I'm not sure why. I mean, it could be that it just wasn't getting as much sun, maybe, but I don't know if the fast had something to do with that. I'm not so sure.
I have to admit, I love this part especially. Ron is a really intelligent guy, and it made me chuckle when he mentioned that he didn't want to tell his doctor that he was, 17 days into a water fast. So he's absolutely right that it would have highly likely have biased her advice to him. Not that I recommend keeping vital information from your physician, but for a routine physical with no other health issues, I get a kick out of this approach. So anyway, as you heard, everything was normal, except his blood sugar and vitamin D levels were low. So why might that be? Well, blood sugar always drops from not consuming carbohydrates. The reason there was any blood sugar present is because our liver begins producing glucose, blood sugar, when a hormone known as glucagon is released by the pancreas. Glucagon stimulates the liver to convert a section of the fat molecule released by the fat cells into sugar and kick it out into the bloodstream. Without this process, we'd end up in a coma, as our brain benefits from a certain amount of blood sugar. So it being low is normal under these circumstances. That said, he also mentioned reduced vitamin D levels. There are a number of possibilities here. So one, there are multiple forms of vitamin D, so the test could have detected one and not the others, meaning the one being measured may be metabolized into some of the others at a more rapid pace, leaving the stores low. Two, vitamin D is stored in fat tissue, but levels tend to circulate when we consume it. And since Ron wasn't consuming anything other than water, his fat store release may have been minimal to preserve tissue vitamin D levels, leaving blood levels low. So ultimately, Ron did an amazing job through perseverance, and it clearly worked for him. But as you know, I believe in focusing on sustainability, and Ron did a brilliant job of this. So in the second video of our series with Ron, we're going to go into how he got not only into maintaining his water fast results, but improved on them massively, as well as how he broke his fast after 54 days. See you there. Hello, this is a part 2 of my interview with Ron, one of my subscribers, who decided to do a 54-day water fast and posted under one of my study analyses on water fasting. Well, I saw the comment and with some excited encouragement from some others, got Ron on the line and had the absolute pleasure of hearing his story. In this video, I want to go over Ron's experience with maintaining his weight loss as well as building on it to create an unbelievable physique. I know you may also be curious on how he broke his water fast, so we'll cover that as well. As with the last video, I'll also explain some of the physiology so that we can get a more full understanding of what happens to the body when we water fast over an extended period of time. So the first query was to ask him how he broke his fast. Did he do anything special? Here's Ron.
That's why I broke my fast earlier than what I expected, because I kind of did the math, and I'm like, around roughly 70 or around 70 to 80 days it would take me to get to 180 pounds from 260. But I was going overseas, and I already, by around day 20, day 30, I already had a plan on how I was going to break my fast. So I didn't want to really completely shock my body, because I've also read and stuff like that. So I did a bone broth. So I made I don't know if you know where oxtail is, but I took the bones of oxtail and I made a bone broth out of that. It was very fatty, and that's how I broke my fast. And then I ate that for like a couple days, and then I started adding vegetables. Like I think day 3 I started adding vegetables. I added kimchi, sauerkraut, all that stuff. Then after the 7th day, I started to I ate a sandwich. I ate a boiled egg sandwich with sauerkraut and avocado, just to see how my body would react, and it's fine.
Okay, so again, Ron really thought this out on a number of points. One, he knew how long it would take to reach his goal weight by simply doing the math. That's a smart, systematic approach, and it would have worked. But as you heard, he had commitments that stayed his ability to continue the fast. 2, he started off for the first few days by consuming bone broth. This is a great way to go about it because, as we know from our study analyses up to this point, that our body becomes extremely insulin resistant during an extended water fast. So consuming food that is heavily fat-based allows the continuity of a fat-based metabolism in the cells. So the cells have been using fat metabolism supplied by the fat released by the fat cells over the last 50 plus days. So introducing a source from nutrition allows the intestinal cells to adapt to the reintroduction of food, as well as reduces the release of fat from the fat cells slightly. This preserves the fat metabolism in the cells, since the cells can't tell the difference between the fat from nutrition and fat from the fat tissue, but avoids intestinal discomfort from a shrunken intestinal tract. This is great thinking. Finally, he introduced light carbohydrates like vegetables. This is great as well because they tend to digest slowly, raising blood sugar more slowly than drinking juice or eating simple sugars. And this allows the cells of the body to begin reintroducing insulin sensitivity and metabolic adaptation back to a more carbohydrate-centric metabolism. He also tapered it over 7 days, which is also an excellent idea. Perfect execution. But once people finish their fasts, many will tend to start regaining all of the weight that they put on. So how did Ron avoid that? And actually, how did he improve on his results?
So I maintained, so I lost more weight after I broke my fast. So when I broke my fast and I introduced the food, I saw that I weighed 199 pounds. And that was after about a week and a half of eating the bone broth, the starchy vegetables, the sandwich, and all that stuff. So I saw that my weight jumped up to 199, and then I continued going down to roughly, the lowest I got is 170 or so pounds. I lost, I want to say, so if it was 199, once I broke, I probably lost an additional 20 or so, like 20 or so pounds after I broke my fast. And that was just doing OMAD. And I've maintained 170 to 180 ever since I broke my fast in 2018. I've maintained this roughly around this weight. I do OMAD now, and I don't really count calories now. I can roughly tell how much I'm eating just based on how full I am. I'm able to just see, and I know how much I'm eating, especially because, you know, I know how my body feels after so amount of calories. So, and OMAD, for me, OMAD is the best way, just because I have a really busy schedule, and, you know, it's just worrying about food just once a day is awesome. And so I started essentially almost carnivore-ish. You know, I was just eating, probably after 3 weeks or so, I was just simply eating just meat. And I did that probably for about a year or so, like just eating meat. I would eat some carbs, you know, but not very often. But as I started progressing more on my weights, you know, especially like for squats, deadlifts, bench press, and then also because I do heavy weights and I run a lot. And the more I started doing that, is like the more I started seeing how important carbohydrates and fats are in a energy and recovery sense. My diet has always been relatively high fat after I broke it, but I've introduced a lot more carbs, specifically honey and fruits, especially towards this year, that I've taken really long distance running very seriously. You know, I run probably right now probably between 30 to like 40 miles a week right now is my training cycle right now. Yeah, I've introduced definitely a lot more carbs because I just need it, especially on the days that I have to do weights, and then due to time constraints, I do weights, and then the next work, like literally a couple minutes after I do my weights, which is like when I do weights is about an hour or so, I have to go in for like a 4-mile run. So definitely on those days, I've just seen the importance, because I can feel it, of carbs and fats.
Ron mentions a few things. One, that he's adopted a nutrition style of OMAD, or one meal a day. He doesn't feel the need to count calories because this method is enough to keep things in check. Two, he mentions that he's been lifting weights as well as running. Both of these methods have allowed him to lose an additional 9 kilograms, or 20 pounds or so, from the end of his fast. So not only did he manage to maintain his weight, but he lost weight and eventually built muscle. Clearly, he's doing quite well for himself using simple but effective techniques. OMAD is a great way to control your consumption because eating throughout the day can lead to unconscious overeating from grazing, so we've almost all done it. OMAD eliminates that issue by packing one large meal into the day only. So lifting weights lends itself well to building muscle and increasing energy expenditure, and running also contributes to energy expenditure. All three combined lead to a powerful combination over years for the growth of a strong, functional body. He really did a fantastic job here too. Ron clearly did things exceptionally well, but people often complain about the safety of water fasting, especially for such a long time. So I wanted to ask Ron his experience. Did he suffer any consequences, some negative consequences from water fasting? The answer is yes, but in some really intriguing ways. In the next video, we'll get into them, so I'll see you there. We're into our third video going through one of the subscribers, Ron's, 54-day water fasting journey. In the previous videos, Ron detailed his results, how he maintained and even improved on his weight loss, as well as his health markers. But now I'd like to explore a bit on the darker side of water fasting. Did he experience any consequences while going through this extended water fast? I'll go ahead and tell you that the answer is yes. But how did they manifest, and what was the reason behind them? I'll let Ron tell his experience, and then I'll physiologicize his experience with an explanation of the mechanisms why. Let's do it.
During the fast, the fifth day were probably the worst. I want to say, like, that was more than anything, it was just a war in the mind. You know, it was just, it's like you know, it's a bit weird, but it's like I could smell carbohydrates. It's like I would be outside and I could smell that they were having pizza 7 houses across the, you know, or they were making pasta. I don't know why, but especially pasta, you know, pizza. It's like I could smell it from like blocks and blocks away. It was like, so it was just a war of the mind there. As I told you, I had on the 7th day, I was sitting on the couch and I kind of got up and I kind of lost consciousness for like a second or two, I want to say, and I woke up again. And I feel that's one of the only consequences I feel like I had. And at that point, I was already 7 days, and that was I just did 7 days of just straight water. It was just only water. That's it, nothing else. And that's after that, I started reading up to it more, and it's the electrolytes. So I guess the electrolytes, I'm not sure if it's true, but that's one of the few things the body does not store into the fat. So I started introducing salt, and after that, I didn't have that problem at all. I want to say probably around the same time, probably day 6 or so, I did have day 6 or day 5, but it went away after I introduced salt. I'm not sure if that has to do with the liver, you know, going deep into ketosis, but I did experience some sort of yellow ting in my eye for like a day.
So, what's going on here? There are 3 main consequences that he experienced. 1, heightened sense of smell for food. 2, blacking out. And 3, yellowing of his eyes. Let's understand why. He comically mentioned that he could smell food, especially carbohydrates, from many houses down several days into his water fast. That's not a surprise, considering there is evidence in the literature that when we are food restricted, our olfactory bulb, which is a section of the front of our brain, becomes more active. As in the neurons, the brain cells that descend from the bulb into the nasal cavity have a lower threshold of activation, meaning they are more sensitive to smell. One of the more worrisome issues is when Ron mentioned that he blacked out. He was unconscious for a few seconds. He then did some research on electrolytes and thought that they might help. He's exactly right. While our kidneys will recycle electrolytes as best they can, if you aren't consuming any, you will see a loss over time. The reason that's an issue is because certain electrolytes, like sodium, offer volume to the bloodstream by attracting water. Since your blood vessels are a certain size, they need to be filled with a certain amount of volume to create sufficient blood pressure. If water is lost from the bloodstream, pressure drops, leading to you passing out. The reason Ron passed out when he stood up is because his blood had pooled in his lower body. So his brain had no blood pressure and knocked him out to get him on the level ground, redistributing the blood back across the body, including the brain. It's the same reason when a person with low blood pressure stands up abruptly, they feel lightheaded and might see their vision darken on the sides. The introduction of salt then continues to attract water into the blood, maintaining blood pressure. So he assessed it perfectly. Next, he mentions yellowing of the eyes. Now, this is going to take some speculation on my part, but he's not wrong for blaming the liver. Normally, yellowing of the eyes and skin is blamed on the liver for its inability to dispose of old red blood cells efficiently enough. This leads to an excess bilirubin, a molecule created when red blood cells are destroyed. Bilirubin turns skin and eyes yellow, so I can see why someone would be worried about this, and if it persisted, it might be an issue, and it seems that it was transient in Ron. So, why did it happen? Like I said, I'm speculating, but cells also require electrolytes to maintain their shape. If the body has too high or too low of electrolytes, it can cause cells to crumple up or burst as the water follows the electrolytes out and into the cells. Either that or some other reason. So the red blood cells were being destroyed at a pace that may have outpaced what the liver could dispose, thereby increasing the bilirubin levels, turning the eyes yellow. Ron mentioned that the issue never came back when he started consuming electrolytes, so it's possible the electrolytes were necessary to keep the cells in an isotonic state, meaning a happy, healthy state. This is typically a pretty drastic situation, so if it had persisted, it would have been wise to go to a physician. If my mechanism is right is up for debate, but it was very likely bilirubin that caused the yellowing. Ultimately, water fasting can be done safely and to profound effects, but educating yourself like Ron did is important because while the body is adept at keeping you alive and functional, it's best to keep yourself in the safest scenario by supplying it with what it needs so that it doesn't rely on all these physiological emergency systems alone, like your kidneys reabsorbing electrolytes to keep things going. Also, if you black out, you never know if you'll hit your head on a table or something else more drastic. If you're interested in more water fasting content, then simply join me in my next video. And finally, I'd like to thank Ron for his transparency in sharing his amazing journey. I hope you learned a few things from his experience. Thank you.